Exclusively sponsored by the law firm Condori and Murad, where Grant and Danny, estate planning, elder law, real estate transactions, probate administration. Their attorneys are there to protect you and your family's assets. Schedule a free consultation with their team today at kmlawyers.com and be sure to mention us to get a discount. That's kmlawyers.com. Let's go to the Rude Guest Hotline. Rude, the most reliable heating and air conditioning products in the DMV. And welcome onto the program, our buddy Ben Standig. You know him from his work covering the Commanders. He's now Substack Standig. Last Man Standig is the Substack, and you can check out his work. You can read some of the work for free there as well, so go check out the Substack. Ben, thanks for hopping on. How are you?
I'm getting nervous about this snow. I've reached the age where it's the biggest 180 of my life. I love snow as a kid, like we all did. Can't stand it now, so I'm a little bit nervous.
When did it change? Well, like, what? Do you remember the moment?
Probably the moment I realized that if it snowed, I still had to go to work.
Yep.
Fortunately, we're in the off season, so to speak, but I still like to leave my house and do stuff. And I get it. It's not like I can shovel, but it's just it adds layers to things, and I'm out.
But to that point, you don't have to go anywhere really. You're in the off season. You don't have to drive to the facility. I remember when I was on the beat, like a snowstorm was kind of fine because I could just work on the computer at the house, put the feet up, throw in frozen pizza or something, not have to have a good excuse in my mind and not have to eat good or something. Like, I don't know. Is it the worst thing? Just work and cover the football team?
Oh, I hear you on that. Well, I'll be honest, one variable is the Senior Bowl is next week. I have not committed to going the way Reuben Bain did today, but I'm debating it, and I would fly out Monday. So if the snow is a big thing on Sunday, what does that mean for Monday? So that's there is an actual work element there that I'm got to factor in. But yeah, I'm mostly just being an old man, yelling at the clouds. But still,
you can go full Ron Rivera and just skip it, even though it's part of the gig.
I could do that. Yeah. I could do that.
Yeah, not that I'm resentful of that at all. Ben, let's get into this. The simple fact that Mike McDaniel is going to be an OC. And if you land on David Blau after a thorough search, your point is, hey, he's going to be here for multiple years. We're getting a guy a year early instead of letting him walk out of the building. I think it's very reasonable. But not overturning any other stone, it seems kind of not that great of a process. Take it from there.
Yeah, I think that, I think we all understand that David Blau is a big risk, which isn't to say it's the wrong choice. It's just the unknown. And, if there's a lot of layers to this, like if you already were moving on from Cliff Kingsbury or whenever they made that decision, it's one thing to say, now, I'm not saying that you do that. You make this move because of that, but that's something you have to consider. And David Blau was obviously getting interest from the Lions right off the bat. That was an organization he had been with Dan Campbell's first year. So I don't think they were just randomly choosing him as a guy to meet with. I think there was real interest there. He had an interview scheduled, from my understanding, sort of the end of that week that they ended up hiring him. And I think if they had let him out the door, I can't say definitively that the Lions hire him, but I don't think it's impossible. And if then what? So, sure, I get the Mike McDaniel thing, and could probably point to some other people as well. But Mike McDaniel's been interviewing for head coaching jobs too. Like the Charger situation just unfolded yesterday. So they would have had to wait, hypothetically, all this time to then have Mike McDaniel say what he would or wouldn't want to do. Now, all of a sudden, you could lose Blau. There's no guarantee McDaniel comes here, and then what? And so I think, again, we don't know if Blau is the right call or not, but they decided we'd rather take him, go for the upside, not risk losing him versus, look, I'm sure they had an inkling of what Mike McDaniel's plans were. We how we all sit here and say, oh, this coach is on the same staff as that coach, or this guy went to college with this guy, or whatever it might be that connects them. There's no greater connection in this entire process than Dan Quinn and Mike McDaniel, with McDaniel openly talking about Dan Quinn helping him become sober.
And so, Ben, I've said this to Danny. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt and assuming that Quinn reached out and they had a phone call and he kind of gauged his interest or whatever. But there was no formal request. There was no interview. They didn't contact the agent for Mike McDaniel to set up an interview. So I guess in a hypothetical world, what if Dan Quinn didn't have that conversation with McDaniel? Could you be okay with that? And the second part would be, like, you're talking to someone who actually is cool with the Blau hiring, and I would even say I like it. Like, it's up my alley. I'm game. I'm in. But I also think it is reasonable and accurate to say this was not a thorough OC search at all. They interviewed 2 guys outside the building, neither of whom have ever called plays before or are really getting other sniffs. Lunda Wells, and I'm sure he's a good coach. I don't mean this disrespectfully. I wouldn't recognize him if he was sitting on my lap. And Drew Terrell, who was here for a couple hours and then went to the Cardinals. But, like, look at their DC search. It looks nothing like their OC search.
That would be amazing, by the way. Some guy sat in your lap and you're like, excuse me? And he's like, yeah, I'm Lunda Wells.
I'm Lunda Wells.
I mean, but seriously, I wouldn't know that guy.
That'd be pretty awesome. Yeah, no, look, I mean, again, I think this is a case of where I'll give them the benefit of the doubt and say that they were concerned that Blau might be gone, right? That if he gets to Detroit, as we see with a lot of these jobs, you let somebody you let somebody go interview, and if this is a real candidate, they may not get out of the building. So I think they had to weigh that, and then, how quickly can you get some other people to come in? Like, we talk about the guys who have or haven't called plays before. Again, anybody like McDaniel or Matt Nagy, Mike McCarthy, whoever you want, they're all looking to get head coaching jobs. So they're going to wait that out as best they can and see. So now you have to wait for all these people who we might say, well, this person's qualified to do this. We think this could be a reasonable hire. All those guys, as we see, are basically waiting to see what else happens here. And then, of course, every time somebody else gets hired, now these other jobs open up, right? I mean, this isn't, like San Francisco loses Robert Saleh to the Titans to be their head coach. Now their coordinator situation's open. So the amount of positions that are being open isn't like static either. So yeah, I'm with you. Like, it would have been cooler if they had brought in McDaniel or somebody else to say, to have that conversation. Sure. But I also think a lot of times these interviews, it's like more fact finding than it is actually an interview. So if they decided Blau was their guy, I mean, look, when they made the move to move on from Cliff, they had to have, at least you would think, had some thought of where they wanted to go. And clearly Blau was, if not choice number 1, somewhere high on that list. And once they made that move, they're like, we can't put ourselves in a position where we don't get Blau and we don't get one of the top OC candidates.
And it would fit better if they interviewed or tried to interview anybody else. You see what I'm saying? Like, to me, you kind of can't have it both ways. I'm not saying you, Ben, but one can't have it both ways, which is they had to act quickly, otherwise Blau was gone, and they did all this reaching out behind the scenes that's not reported to Nate Schilhaas and Thomas Brown, the pass game coordinator for the Patriots, or Charlie Weiss Jr., or anybody anywhere other than these very overt 2 interviews outside the building, 2 internal, and then it was like, okay, it's David Blau because he might get on a plane to Detroit. You know what I mean? Like, are we sure due diligence was done or not? It just seems to me that Dan Quinn was afraid to lose somebody again because he has trauma from his time in Atlanta.
Look, I think your skepticism on some of these fronts, I think, is fair. I'll say this to play the, I'm not trying to spin anything, but trying to look at this, how they might look at it.
Sure.
Let me spin it the other way. Let me play devil's advocate. You look at the offensive line coach hires, right? They promote 2 guys internally. Darnell Stapleton goes from assistant to the head guy, and Shane Tapp goes from quality control coach to the assistant O-line coach. My initial sense is that, look, Stapleton played in the league. He was here the last couple of years. My sense is that the players do respond to him, and I'm not just saying that like that's just not a talking point. I've tried to go beyond hearing from what what they want to tell me,
right,
and I get that sense. But you could look at that and say they took a look around the league. They saw some guys that they may want who are more experienced and got the feeling that, hey, we may not be able to get them because people look at our situation and think, is Dan Quinn making it past one more year? I think it's at least a reasonable question to ask.
It is, Ben, and I'm sorry to cut you off, but don't you still have to talk to them? I mean, don't you? You know what I mean? Like at a minimum, don't you have to hear what Mike McDaniel thought about your offense and defense? Don't you have to talk to Brian Dable? Like, I know you may not have gotten the guy that you wanted, but like, don't you have to do more than talk to London Bridge? You know what I mean?
Yeah, I hear you. I mean, like, remind me here because I'm losing track. The McDaniel was let go on a Thursday, and they hired Blau on Friday.
It was either a Wednesday to a Friday or something like that. It was close to it. Yeah, wasn't much time.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So they obviously were already somewhat down a path to then be like, hey, this is the thing. And again, I'm sure Quinn had a feeling for where McDaniel was going to be. And now if McDaniel is going to linger and he wants the head coaching job and he's like, I'm not really, whatever, we have a conversation, but it doesn't really matter, then, they may not have a choice. Also, because of the playoffs, not every single coach was available to them when they necessarily would want them to be available, right? I mean, double check me. Like, I think all the Rams coaches interviewed with people last week after they had already done the Blau thing, but I don't know if they necessarily did it the week prior.
Could they have done anything to block Blau? I know that he would have been getting an elevated job. So does he just get to do whatever he wants? They can't say no?
I think if it's going to be a position upgrade, I think that's right. Like, it's one thing I think it'd go from assistant, like when they blocked him last year, just as a quarterback coach. But I think to go to an OC from where he was to go to an OC, I don't know that they could have necessarily blocked him there either. So look, I don't disagree with you. It would be cool to sit here and say, hey, they should have interviewed people just the way they are here on defense, but. I'm hoping that they had a feeling that if Blau left the building and went to Detroit that he wasn't going to come back. And they said, we can't afford to risk this because it's not like we have a bird in the hand over here with anybody else. And then again, on top of it, this shouldn't be their overriding thing. But if you let Blau go, now no matter who you're bringing in, it's starting over from ground zero for Jaden Daniels. And I don't know that that's where they want to be either. So put it all together, I understand why they made the move. It certainly would have been a little more palatable if they had, like they are for the defense, interviewing a whole bunch of different people, including a lot of people that or have been coordinators or highly respected. But they obviously have been with Blau the last couple of years. I'm sure their belief in him factored into moving on from Kingsbury, and here we are.
Ben Standig. It's Last Man Standing. His Substack covers the Commanders. So my curiosity about the offensive side of the ball right now, Danny's is more about the McDaniel part of the interviewing process. Mine is about kind of where they've landed with some of the assistants. And I thought the O-line coach was going to be the most important coach hire that they would have. And oftentimes, they're going to do your protections and your run game. So this is a huge thing for this first-timer. And they just promoted, as you said, from within with a first-time O-line coach. And Taub gets promoted from kind of, doing his role of helping with videotapes and all that to the assistant O-line coach. And as of right now, they have not brought a real true veteran into the building. So I guess here are a few questions. Anthony Lynn's interviewing for the Bills job, but do we think he's going to be on this staff? Is Brian Johnson, who interviewed for the OC job and then got literally leapfrogged by David Blau in the pecking order, is he going to stay on this staff even though he got bypassed, basically? Is that a possibility? What do we know about him? And then do they need more veteran pelts on the wall guys, or are they comfortable on a side of the ball where their head coach is defensive-minded, just having a bunch of kids run the room?
Yeah. I've been saying from the jump that, especially once you knew Blau was on board, that having another somebody who's been a coordinator, gone through, been in these positions there to help him is paramount. Not as a babysitter, but just as another voice. And it's important because and I know, Grant, you've harped on this a lot, but like with Dan Quinn being the defensive guy, that doesn't help the cause here. That's why it's a challenge when it's the head coach is a defensive guy, because the offensive guy could always just leave and then you're starting over a lot. The Brian Johnson part to me is very interesting. I don't know exactly what his hopes and dreams were, but I imagine he would have liked to have been named OC once Cliff was out. That didn't happen. He's been here for a couple of years. I have no reason to think he hasn't been cool with being here. But where is this going? If David Blau is going to be the OC for a while, then what is Brian Johnson doing other than just being an assistant? Does he want to do more? Does he have opportunities? That's unknown. Anthony Lynn, I guess I would be surprised if he got the Buffalo job, but that doesn't mean, he couldn't possibly be their, OC or something, right? And I know, there was this internet rumor about could he be joining his son at Penn State because his son was just named DC. I don't think that's a thing, but sure. And is Anthony Lynn enough? He's been a head coach and an OC, but I don't know. Is his vision modern enough? Not saying it isn't, but he's an older guy. Blah blah blah. So I think they still probably need to bring in somebody else. The one guy, and this is not me reporting; it was just my thought, was a guy like Darrell Bevel, who has been there, done that. OC quarterback coach. He's been with Miami the last few years. He was with Dan Quinn in Seattle. They were both coordinators, right, on some of those teams. And that, to me, would make a lot of sense. The Miami just, of course, hired a new head coach, so maybe I don't know if they've made the decisions on what they want to do with their staff, but a guy like that would make a lot of sense. Now, again, I have not heard that. That's just me, again, putting together guys work together, so let's just pair them up. But, yeah, I think if Brian Johnson and or Anthony Lynn leave, not only do they have to replace those positions, they got to bring in somebody who, is an adult in the room and can, has been there, done that, can be a voice that Blau and others can lean on. Otherwise, not saying that the kids can't do it, but now you are with a very inexperienced group.
Ben, speaking of that, if Cliff Kingsbury gets a job somewhere, and not just to be a voiceover guy with a deep voice, but to coach football, might they lose some other coaches?
Well, it's possible. I think I think Blau and David Rye, the tight end coach, were the two that were most associated with Cliff. Obviously, Blau is now locked up. It would not surprise me if Rye were to go, should Cliff be in a position to bring people along with him. I also think, forget staff, if Cliff lands in a spot where they need a spot starter or potential, or higher end backup, that Mariota goes with him, I think that's very plausible. Again, we'll have to see what spot that would be, depending, some teams have a legit backup, or I don't know that Mariota would. Let's just say Baltimore got in the mix, and I know Cooper Rush is there, but let's just say they kick him out. Does Mariota want to go behind Lamar Jackson? It's different than a guy in Jaden Daniels who was just coming into the league. I don't know, but I would think if Kingsbury goes somewhere where they need another quarterback, that Mariota, if I had to bet, I would bet he follows him there. So I think that's something else to keep in mind.
Ben Standig with us on G&D. Is Daron Payne a lock to be on the roster at his current number?
Absolutely not.
So how do you view the decision on him? Is it more interesting maybe than it's being made?
Well, look, like everything else, it's all relative to, okay, sure, you can move on from this guy, but then what are you doing, right? They already have holes all over this roster, especially on defense, that they've got to fill. Could you sit there and say, well, if we move on from Daron Payne, so I think it's like a $28 million cap hit roughly, they would save $16 million on that, so there would still be some dead cap, but there's more money on the savings part of it. Is that worth it versus keeping him either at that 28, which is a huge number, or they, could they renegotiate, come up with an extension that lowers the immediate cap hit, but keep him around? Look, Daron Payne's been a fine player. We all saw his upside back in 2022 when he had his big breakout year. But since then, it's been kind of what it's been his whole career. There's been flashes, but I don't know that we've ever, the last 2 years, have gone into a game and thought, well, this other team's not running on Washington because Daron Payne is sitting there, or they're gonna have to put extra blockers to defend the middle of the line because Daron Payne is there. Good player. I think he's $28 million cap hit. He's overpaid for what they have seen. Now they have to decide again what do they think they can get out of him. We already saw them last year move on from John Allen in sort of a similar circumstance. If I had to guess, I would think that he moves on, that they move on from Payne as well, and then that gives them even more cap space than they already have. But again, if you do that, you're either saying we believe that Johnny Newton's ready to go, or you're gonna commit to spending money or drafting a guy to replace him, and now that's just another hole that you have. So it's a tricky spot, but if I had to bet, I don't see him back at the $28 million cap hit at least.
So if you had to guess, you would say they released Deron Payne.
That would be my guess, yes.
Wow, that's interesting. And then last one I want to sneak in, Brandon Ayuk as an option at wide receiver.
What numbers are he going to wear?
On the cheap. What would you make of the fit of bringing him in here?
Positionally, I think it's a better fit than Deebo Samuel, like just to put the San Francisco guys together because he's an outside receiver. I mean, look, I think Deebo was fine last year. At times he was more than fine. But ultimately, to me, he's just a little bit of a gadget guy that is a luxury that they just can't afford to have right now. I'd rather see them invest that money in an outside receiver to help Terry McLaurin, give him some protection down the field and so on. But I've got massive reservations about it being Brandon Ayuk. I get that he's been productive. I get Adam Peters drafted him. I get the Jaden Daniels thing. I get all that. But I also get that the 49ers signed this guy to a deal, and then within a year we're like, yeah, he's out. And we're just going to avoid the whole thing, and he's not even complaining. We also don't even know where he is with coming off this injury. I assume by now he's back, but he's ready to go. But it was a pretty significant injury, a knee injury. So I personally would have a hard time bringing him in, especially if you're going to give me all this culture talk. But I would rather have him, I think, positionally than I would Deebo if they are confident that he's got a good mindset and he's healthy and he's ready to go.
Ben, thank you as always, buddy. Talk soon.
Fellas, always appreciate it.
Check out his work. Last Man Standig is his Substack, covers the Commanders very, very well and gets a lot of news.